Hello, my name is Kate Hudson Hall, and thank you for listening to Bulimia Sucks. Now, this is a platform for people to share relatable and uplifting and inspiring conversations based on bulimia and anorexia and other eating disorders. And each episode will include personal stories of where they are now and their difficult journeys and steps taken into their recovery, and also to professionals who work with people with eating disorders. My Bulimia Sucks audiobook is now live on Audible and Amazon and iTunes. And if you would be interested and would like a free copy of this, please email me at katehudsonhall@gmail.com, and then I can send you the code to download it for free. And also the Bulimia Sucks digital pack is now available. And this pack, this program is designed to show you how to begin to finally take those small steps forward in your recovery from your eating disorder. And what is included is 8 hours of video content, a copy of Bulimia Sucks, the PDF, and also a hypnosis recording, which is an MP3 download. There's a family and friend support ebook download, and also a relaxation hypnosis recording for those times when you may feel very stressed or anxious or whatever that may be, that difficult feeling. You just need some time out to calm and relax yourself. And also there is access to the private Facebook group for ongoing support and regular Facebook Live Q&A sessions with myself. So to find out more, if you go to bulimiasucks.com, all the information is in there. Now, our guest today is Stephanie Webb. Oh, it's very exciting. Stephanie is a podcaster, a speaker, and an author. And she is someone who believes in asking questions and challenging herself to grow. And I like that, because we should all be doing that, questioning and challenging ourselves. And her podcast, called StephUp Podcast, is about learning more about ourselves and the world around us through authentic conversations. And also, which is really exciting, she's just published her very first children's book called What Should Dragons Do? Let me get it right.
What should dragon do? Yeah.
What should dragon do?
Yeah, dragon's a character.
Oh, I see. What should dragon do? Which teaches how to navigate the everyday frustrations of life and handle them with kindness. But Stephanie's here today to talk about her experience with binge eating and her pathway through the muddy waters. So welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you, Kate. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us.
And I have to ask, do you do the hypnosis?
I do, yes.
Because your voice is so soothing. I love it.
Oh, thank you. Yes, no, I have done that for the last 22 years. So they are my hypnosis recordings. So, yeah. So welcome. And it's great to have you here, Stephanie. And so, well, let's begin with your pattern with regards to food and your eating when you were younger and then moving forward.
Yeah, so it's really exciting to talk about this because, like I was telling you, I think the more that we're able to talk about it, it's a very healing process.
Yeah.
So as far back as I can remember, I was stress eating, emotional eating, binge eating. And I think it goes as far back. My earliest memory, I think I was 4 or something. Because I was working with a life coach and he asked me what was the earliest memory you have of when you were actually like maybe taking food and like enjoying it, but like you were not supposed to.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, and what did you feel during that time?
Yeah.
So, I think also as well, growing up in the 80s and 90s, we didn't understand what full meant. You were just told you have to eat what's on your plate. So not only did I find sugary foods and that enjoyment whenever I was stressed and emotional, I would go to that, but I also didn't know when to stop because you were just forced to always finish what's on your plate.
And that is so common for most of my clients, that
yeah,
they
right?
were told when they were young, you've got to eat everything on your plate. And so
it's
that's
so
the way that you,
interesting. Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
So that's kind of, that's the pattern that you get into. So you're not tuning into that feeling of being moderately full, I call it. You just carry on eating till you've finished everything on your plate. And that's really hard for some people to
It
be able to
is.
change that pattern.
And I have a niece and a nephew, and they just, when they're done eating, we would say, oh, you got to finish what's on your plate. And then we started to realize, as the world is realizing, that's not healthy. So I was like, oh, mind blown. These kids can say, no, I'm done. We shouldn't force them. So I think that's awesome. But yeah, I was a chubby kid too. And so I think it started maybe kindergarten, grade 1, I started getting teased for being chubby, and then I was fat. And I look back and I'm like, I was actually not, maybe a little bit, but I wasn't obese. But I took that on thinking I was fat, and I was very insecure and highly sensitive person. So I took that all on upon myself, which made me then eat, especially when I got home. I'd have a bad day at school because kids were mean, and I would go to food. And this developed, like I've had this since as far back as I can remember. So and then my mom always put us on different diets because she was on Weight Watchers and she was trying to lose weight. So it's like, well, let's try the cabbage soup diet. Do you remember that one?
Yes. No, I
For a
never
whole
went on
week.
it, but I remember people talking about it. Yeah.
And then you're starving and you're like, I want to eat real food. So, yeah, I mean, it's been quite the journey. And I used to think that it was just self-control and why do I do that? I didn't even question why I did it. I just did it. But I was thinking, well, other people are skinny. I just need to be skinny. And that was the hardest thing, because then you try and then you think, well, it's so hard because I'm stressed out and I tend to eat. And you're kind of stuck in this cycle where then it's self-loathing.
Yeah.
Which then you go to food
To make
to
you feel
comfort
better.
yourself.
Yeah. And so many other different negative emotions that can be wrapped up in that. Reasons why you reach out for food when you're not hungry for it. I do believe that the heavier somebody is, the more triggers and negative patterns there are connected with the food that need to be addressed.
Right, because you start to look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, oh, I've gained weight. Oh, I feel awful. And then people tell you, people say, well, you're overweight. Like, thanks a lot. I didn't realize. I've had so many of those. Actually, can I tell you a funny story?
Oh, yes. We love funny stories. Please.
I think I was 20 and I was babysitting. I was helping a friend of mine who had like 3 young kids, and she was a single mom and she didn't have a car. So I was taking her around and we went to the bank, and she was a very petite woman and she had twins. So I was at the side with the twins, and this other lady came over and she goes, oh, what cute children, and I was like, oh, thanks, but they're actually hers. And she looked at me and she goes, But you look like you've had children. She doesn't look like she's had children.
Oh,
And I turned bright red because I was so insecure at that time, and just, I just wanted to die inside. It was awful.
yeah, yeah. Oh gosh. People need to think before they say things like that.
I think
Oh,
that the world is changing, and I appreciate that. I think we're becoming more sensitive to people's feelings.
yes.
And, the older generation calls them all marshmallows, but I think it's wonderful.
What do they call it? Marshmallows.
Marshmallows, like, oh, you're too soft.
Oh, I see. Yes. But no, it's actually, it's tuning into, those feelings that we have
Yeah,
and working with them.
for sure.
So as you were a teenager, I suppose the behavior just continued, reaching out for food when something difficult happened.
Yeah, it actually just got even worse because as you're older and you
Yeah.
start to drive and you have some money, you can go through drive-through. And what I loved about drive-through was you didn't have to walk into a store or a restaurant and have people look at you.
Of course, yeah. It's
You
kind
can
of a
just
get
drive
out
through.
clause.
Yeah, drive through, get your food, eat in your car, and
Mm.
nobody's judging you or looking at you. So I remember thinking I love drive-through, but at the same time, I hated it because it was so easy to go and just grab food. And I remember one time I was actually in college in my mid-20s, and my parents and I were going to go out for dinner. But on the way home after school, I went to Burger King and I ate a whole meal, the burger, fries, pop. I was so full. And then we went out for dinner and I ate a whole meal. And I was so full. I felt so sick and I hated myself because I was like, why did you do that? It was like this compulsion. I had a bad day at school and I needed something to make me feel better.
Yeah.
That was like the worst. The worst when you ate so much, you feel so sick
Yeah.
and you can't move. And then you just, that's when also the negative thoughts, you're like, you're so stupid. I hate you. Why did you do this?
Yeah. And then you beat yourself up.
Yes. Which makes it worse.
Self-loathing and shame and
But then also, one thing I always had was digestion issues, and I never knew what it was. Like, I didn't clue in the fact that I was eating so much, and a lot of it was not healthy food. I didn't put the two together, and my doctor was no help because, he was just like, well, you have IBS, but I don't have any medication for you. I was like, okay. Now at the same time, I also had anxiety. So my anxiety was also a trigger with my digestion. It would,
yeah.
but I've noticed that, yeah, my anxiety has gotten a lot better over the years as I've been able to manage it. But also the food. So I notice when I eat too much and I eat the wrong kinds of, like if I'm eating all bread in one day,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, yeah, that's why I don't feel well. That's why I'm having issues. But that was something that I never understood as a kid, as a teenager. Well, we didn't really have a lot
do you think, is it the carbs then? If you eat too many carbs?
and too much sugar and too much dairy.
Right.
Like if I go to Starbucks and I can get maybe a tall, but a grande or venti, I'm just like, oh, my stomach is not, like I feel sick.
Right. So it's become very sensitive.
It has, yeah. I actually thought I had a gluten allergy years ago when I stopped eating gluten and I lost a lot of weight. But I had such bad anxiety. So of course, and I moved to Toronto. So I had depression. So I ate.
Yeah.
And I thought being skinny, I was like, wow, I finally made it. Buying clothes is fun. I look good, but I was not healthy either way. Like I still hated myself. So, and you hear that from people, right? You hear, well, even if you lose weight, if you don't love yourself, you're not going to love yourself skinny or overweight. And that's so true, because I thought I'd finally love myself if I lost all this weight, and maybe guys would like look at me and go, oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
rather than tease me.
Yes. Yes. And so that at that time you lost a lot of weight. And then what was like the pivotal moment for you? What was the turning point for you?
To
To
lose
be,
weight?
yeah, to start to love yourself.
Oh, honestly, that's only been in the last 2 years.
Has it? So
Yeah,
but that's good. You know.
it is. It's been an amazing 2 years. Um, I lived in Toronto for 10 years, and I moved back to my hometown. I live in London, Ontario. So we steal all the
Ooh.
names from you guys. We have Stratford, Thames River, everything. Hyde Park. So Toronto was really hard and overwhelming. And I got up to like over 200 pounds.
Right.
Whereas when I moved to Toronto, I think I was 160.
So why was it really hard for you?
Well, I went back to school, and I also had different kinds of roommates, and some of them the kitchen was not the cleanest. And I felt really, I didn't like cooking in the kitchen because I'd have to take all day just to clean it. And then I was too tired to do cooking. I get really grossed out by things.
Yeah,
it's hard to live with people.
Yes, it's not nice.
And then just if I'm out, at school, and I'd take the transit home, and I'm like, I'll just stop for food because I'm too tired to make food. So, but I had depression and anxiety. So, and just the lack of time because I was working and going to school. So I got a lot of takeout. And then Starbucks, getting a lot of frappuccinos and stuff like that.
Yeah. And if you're really unhappy anyway and depressed, then, that was giving you the comfort and making you feel better in some way, and many other things probably.
Yeah. So, I was working, and for some health issues, I left that job. And so I've been off work for 2 years, although I just started up with a job now. But it was hard, but it was a really great time because I was able to heal in a way that I never had time before. I was doing a lot of reading on personal development, listening to podcasts, and I had a life coach, and he was really helping me, especially with the eating. We went through a lot of that kind of stuff. So, and the anxiety, I mean, I was on medication for about 5 years for anxiety, and I was able to get off it last year. And
Wow.
I'm learning to manage it.
Oh,
so
no. Yeah. So Stephanie, tell the listeners what really helped you to manage the anxiety.
Well, it was a lot of realizing what I grew up with and how I had changed over the years. I grew up very fundamentalist conservative Christian, like evangelicals, that term, and it's very yeah. It's got a very negative connotation. So, and we were basically told what to think all the time. And my dad is a very intense person. So it was like, you have to believe this, and you have to do this. And so I realized after a while, I'm like, why do I get so anxious being around Dad? Oh, because he's so, and I started to read more and understand about emotions and different, how to handle that and how to handle our thoughts. Because personal development, like thinking positively, was really not a thing that in the Christian environment I grew up in. No, like we're sinners and God is the one that makes us complete. Like you can't really say I'm awesome, I'm a good person. That was kind of, you don't say that stuff.
Right.
So really you're in this negative headspace a lot because you're like, well, I'm just bad.
Yeah.
And I think kind of just slowly unlearning what I learned and relearning. Or
Yeah.
somebody said it's like reparenting yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's been hard, but it's been really, really amazing to go through this.
And so because of you starting to change the way you think, the anxiety has reduced.
Yes. And I still actually, because I just started a new job, I get overwhelmed easily, or I can. But my life coach was helping me, and he goes, okay, tackle what's in front of you. And I'm the type of person that, like, or I think we all have this tendency,
Yes.
probably.
Yeah.
You know, you're thinking of 20 things at once. I got to do this. I got to do that. And then you get stressed. And so he was kind of saying, when you're at work, don't think about your podcast and this and this and this. It's work time. And then that's over. And then, okay, now I can focus on this and prioritize your time, write it down. And so just doing different things like that, and getting up and kind of doing some affirmations, doing some deep breathing, going, like, moving, that helped me in the morning, because I would always the person that woke up and go, and I just, like, hit snooze a few times.
Yes.
And that can affect you too.
Stephanie, have you read The Miracle Morning?
I have.
By
Yes.
Hal Elrod?
Yes. That was really amazing. Although I would get stressed because I'm like, this is so much to do all at once. But it's also finding your own thing
Yes.
and
So
how it works for
The
you.
Miracle Morning is basically about focusing on your time in the morning, getting up earlier, maybe an hour earlier, and within that hour, having various different areas to focus on. So one could be 10, 15 minutes meditation. Another could be 10, 15 minutes of yoga, or going out for a walk, and having a number of different areas to within that hour to do. So then once you've spent that hour, that extra hour that you would have been sleeping through, you are set up for the day, and you've got your mind focused, you've set yourself some goals for the day, and you're ready. And people, thousands of people, have been using the Miracle Morning and finding it so beneficial, haven't they?
Yes. Although, like, my life coach was saying, sometimes it can be too overwhelming if you're not in that kind of headspace. And that's
Yeah.
what I found.
Yeah.
So he goes, okay, let's start off with two things. We're going to
Yeah.
get up and we're going to move and, you know, have a few minutes of just, like, quietness. But I'm able to do more because I think, if you just try to do all that at once,
Yeah. Yeah.
if you're the type of person that maybe has a hard time with that kind of stuff. So, but
Yeah.
working up to it, I'm working up to it.
So that's good. But when like you were saying that your mind can get very full and you can get very stressed, it's actually breaking down that bigger picture and thinking, okay, right, so how am I going to break down this all of this stress, and what am I stressed about? And okay, well, let's break down the bigger picture and just focus on one or two things here, the next steps, and then moving on from there.
Yeah, I have found that definitely helpful. And it's also helpful with the food. It's all together.
Yeah.
Like, because I stress and then I stress eat.
Yes.
And it's like this, I'm sure a lot of your listeners will understand it. It's like this compulsion. People would say, well, just don't go for that kind of food. And I wouldn't buy it at the grocery store. But when I was in that moment of needing it, I would go and take the bus
Yeah.
to get that thing I needed.
Yes.
It wouldn't matter if it wasn't in my cupboards.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally get that. I'm sure many of the listeners can relate to that, because if you really want that, you'll go and get it. But and if it's particularly if you deprive yourself of not eating certain foods, if you're on a diet and you're depriving yourself, and there's that last piece of chocolate cake in the fridge, you will go round and you will eat everything else that you shouldn't eat in the kitchen, before you get to that chocolate cake, and then you'll end up eating that chocolate cake.
Right.
Anyway. So, depriving yourself just doesn't work either, does it?
Well, and I've been on those kind of diets.
I think probably most people have.
Like the really restrictive ones. No sugar, no gluten. What else is there? Not even grains, basically just vegetables and protein. I think my max of maybe 2 weeks was the
That's
max.
good.
And then I binge eat. And then
and then all hell lets loose and off you go.
Exactly.
Yes, I think we can all relate to that.
Yeah. But it's funny because there was a lot of that going around. Like the what was that diet where all my friends were on? You're not eating any glycemic keto.
Oh, the keto diet, yes.
And I was like, I want to try it, but I was like, I know that if I have to say no bread ever, no potatoes ever, I was like, I don't think I can do that. And I get the concept of it. It makes sense in the sense of keeping your blood sugar. But if I do that, maybe if I can work on smaller steps instead of grabbing certain foods, I'm like, oh, I'm going to grab a crunchy cucumber instead of chips. Then that helps me because even the crunch is what you kind of long for,
Yeah.
But then thinking, okay, but I'll have chips maybe on another day. I just won't grab for them every time, and not saying never.
Yeah.
Just saying like, yeah, I'll have that later, but I don't need it every day now.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's good. So it's breaking down that pattern, isn't it? And rethinking it.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And so this is amazing. So this last 2 years, you've made all sorts of positive changes. What other changes have you made, Stephanie?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm trying to think.
So when you eat now, with regards to, I call it a feeling of being moderately full, because you spoke about that in the beginning. So when you eat now, are you attuned to the feeling of being full, moderately full?
Yes.
So you stop eating, you can stop eating.
Yes, but I find there's 2 parts of me. There is the compulsion is so much less now. Like when I'm super stressed, I have found other ways of handling that. So it's
What do
not
you
like
do
this.
what do you do if you're very stressed?
Well, I start to automatically like freak out and cry. And then I'm like, okay, it's fine. Like I have to talk myself down because when I start getting overwhelmed, I'm like, I got to do this and I got to, and especially with my new job, there's just so many things to learn. And I'm like, I'll never get this. And that was the attitude I always had with new jobs. I'll never get this. But I've been through it enough that I'm like, I will get it. It's just, I'm in this stage now of learning. And so I've just really been able to kind of take those negative thoughts that come, stop them and turn it around. And yeah, that's been such a process, but it's so amazing because then I can think, okay, it's fine. And I calm down so much better and I don't need that medication and I don't need that food. Now, the only problem is though, the habit part. So because for so long, that was what I would go to, even though that compulsion isn't there, the habit part of me is still kind of thinking of it. So,
Yes. So
do you find that too? Like do people talk about the 2 different, the habit and the compulsion?
Absolutely. And it's something that has been there all your life. So it's something that you've got to work at. You've got to continue to work at it because those voices will always come in. Well, won't always come in, but the more that you can work with them and first of all be aware that they're there and then start to change them, the more it will become a continual habit and a pattern, and then it will become ingrained. So that's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, another thing, thinking of food differently. Whenever I would eat chocolate cake or something, I'm like, I'm bad. That was bad. That's bad food. And so, this is what helpful with the podcast, because you get to talk to different people and learn from them. And I had this one guest on, Julie Glynn. She wrote a book called If My Ass Were Smaller, Life Would Be Perfect. And she talks about that. She goes, don't put labels on food. If you want that chocolate cake, eat it, but say, okay, I had it, just fine. And I found that helpful so much, because I would be like, oh, you're bad. And then I'm telling myself how bad I am because I ate it.
Yeah.
It's like, it's fine. I had it. Next thing I'll choose a healthier option.
Yeah. And it's having, it's not depriving yourself of the food, and we're having it within reason. Because like we were saying with the chocolate cake in the fridge, if you had just allowed yourself to have that and not deprived yourself of it, then you wouldn't have eaten everything else around in the kitchen that you shouldn't have eaten.
Yeah, so true.
So going back to the feeling of being moderately full. So are you attuned to that?
I know when I am full, but I'm not necessarily, I'm still at that point where I'm learning how to stop it. Some days are better than others. Like the other day I was in the middle of something and I was like, I just can't finish this. And that from growing up where you have to eat everything, I got to finish it. But then you're like, no, it's fine. I can pack it up, put it away. Some days I'm really good. Other days I'm just like, I'll just finish it. So I'm still in the process of that.
Yeah, but that's good. But that's, it's a learning, because there's so many different emotions that will come up that will drive you to ignore or for whatever reason carry on eating, because that's something else that's been there for a long time. So it's having the tools to be able to stop yourself from continuing to eat.
And that's that was so lacking in a lot of the diets. And I had a personal trainer who was also, he would get mad at me when I gained weight. One time I visited a friend and I didn't know I was staying for dinner. It was just, she made dinner and it was spaghetti, and I was supposed to write out my meals. So the next week when I went to him and he goes, why'd you have spaghetti? I said, I was at a friend's house. I can't just say no. No, you should have just said no or left and I thought, what? But he also he also didn't understand, and I didn't understand at the time, that it was more than just doing. There was part of me, there's a huge part of me that needed to heal. And so until you dealt with the emotional and mental aspects of that, telling me what to do all the time and getting mad at me was making it worse.
Absolutely.
And I think because more people are more aware of this now.
Yeah. I do. Because I teach weight loss courses, and I find that a lot of people, they're not actually aware of the feeling of, well, first of all, I do believe that if you are not addressing the reasons why you're reaching out for food when you're not hungry, they will always be there. So people go on diets and they, some people do very well and lose weight, but then, 6 months down the line, they more than likely will have put the weight back on, plus weight. And it is really important that people have to understand that they need to address the reasons why they're reaching. There's a whole bigger picture, but one of the areas is to address the reasons why they're reaching out for food when they're not hungry. That needs to be addressed. But also, when I teach my weight loss courses, I also like to guide my clients towards starting to tune into the feeling of being moderately full. This is what I call it. And it's a feeling that is shortly before the feeling of being full. And it's very different for everybody. And for some people, it could be maybe a physical feeling like a slight flutter in the tummy. Other people, the food stops tasting so good, so they know that that's their signal. Other people, it's a knowing. It's a knowing that they've had enough. So it's very different for everybody. But because it's not such a strong feeling like that feeling of being full, people don't know that it's there and they don't recognize it. So it's starting to tune in and eat slowly and consciously. And as you do that, then you're giving yourself the time to be able to become more aware of what that feeling is for you, that moderately full feeling is. So before you get to the feeling of being full, and then learning how and having the tools to be able to stop eating at that particular point.
That's very interesting that different people have different understanding when they're full, because I didn't know that. I thought we all just had the same feeling or
yeah. So because everybody's different.
Mhm.
Some people, it might be very kinesthetic, very, feeling orientated. Other people, it's a thought that they have. So it does depend on the individual, but that is something I think that's very important for people to start to tune in and be aware of, to help them to become slimmer.
I remember hearing you stop, was it when you're 10% full or 50% full, and then wait 20 minutes because then your stomach
Catches
fills.
up. Yeah.
And then, but that was always the hard thing because, also, I did work with a naturopath last year, and she was talking about don't eat in front of a screen, which I tend to do, especially when I lived alone. You're just like, oh yay, watching TV and eating, but you're not being mindful of it. You're just stuffing it in your mouth.
Actually, you shouldn't be doing anything. You shouldn't be watching TV on your phone, on the computer, whatever, when you're eating. You should be focusing on the foods that you're eating, because so many people are just busy watching TV and not recognizing that they're actually eating. They'll finish that meal and they won't really have even tasted a mouthful. So you need to stop and you need to focus on what you're eating and enjoy the flavors and the textures and the tastes and everything when you're eating.
That's how long does it usually take for people to do that? Because I find that hard. We're so used to just shoveling it in our mouth.
It depends what you're eating. But it takes, I think it's 20 minutes for that feeling of being full to actually, but then everybody's different. So it does depend, but the slower that you can eat, the easier it will be for you to really begin to change your patterns and tune into that feeling of being moderately full.
Right.
So you all need to slow your eating down to a quarter of what it was. Try that. But you need to focus. Yeah. You've got to eat consciously and slowly, because otherwise you'll just fall back into your old patterns. You need to be aware and enjoy the foods, because then you'll feel more satisfied, because you'll have actually recognized and realized that you've eaten something and enjoyed it.
What about so I've tried the intermittent fasting, and it has helped me, because in the morning I'm not hungry until maybe 10 or noon. But then other people say it can be a trigger for an eating disorder, because so I wasn't sure if you know about if intermittent fasting is kind of hard for some people with eating disorders.
Yes, it will be. Because you are depriving your body of the food. So and you get particularly hungry, you get very hungry. So therefore it could easily lead to a binge.
Right. And that's what I experienced when I first started it.
Yeah. And that's, so I know it works for a lot of people, but for somebody that has some sort of eating disorder, it's not going to work. You need to address everything else that's going on around and get to the point where you can have the tools to be able to only eat when you're hungry, eat slowly and consciously, and then be aware of that feeling of being moderately full and stopping eating.
Yeah.
But there's so many other areas connected to that. So it's looking at the whole bigger picture. You need to look about how much you move in your body, because it's not, it's not rocket science. If you're not moving your body, then you don't need to eat so much.
Right.
Really. So it's looking at how much water you're drinking. It's looking at the whole bigger picture and figuring out, taking the whole bigger picture, and like we were saying, take it and breaking it down into minute little steps of how you can move forward with all of the different areas.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yes, I have been teaching this for a long time and I love it.
That's awesome. I think it's amazing what you're doing. I mean, and the fact that you're doing the podcast and you have these groups, such a safe space for people, and to hear other stories is very helpful, and to know we're not alone. I mean, I just think I applaud you for the amazing work you're doing.
Oh, thank you, Stephanie. That's so kind. So I know we're running out of time, but I just wanted to hear about your book.
So it's called What Should Dragon Do? You can see that.
I love it. Yes.
So it's about 3 roommates who live together. And those tiny things that happen that will just enrage you? Like somebody leaves toothpaste in the sink and they don't clean it up. And then you're like, so Dragon is the character who gets very angry.
Oh, okay.
And she doesn't really think of others in a sense. So she got mad at the fact that one of the other bears that she lives with left toothpaste in the sink. So she wrote a note and she's like, please clean up your toothpaste. And one of the other bears came home and said, oh, okay. They thought it was funny and then just cleaned it up because they're like, what's the big deal? And so it's kind of just things like that. Yeah, we should clean up after ourselves, but sometimes things get missed, and it's okay to just, you can clean it up. It's fine, or just have a different attitude than to get angry about it. And then you ask, what should Dragon do? So like, what would have been a better response? So this book is for children's ages like 3 to 6.
Yes.
I've had actually one of my old roommates, she read it and she was like laughing the whole time. She's like, oh my word. Yeah. This is different scenarios when I lived with roommates. But yeah, it's my first book. I'm super excited.
When did it launch?
It just came out. So
and is it for sale on Amazon?
Yes. Amazon, Barnes and Noble in the US. Actually, I don't know all the different ones. Ingram Wholesale, I think. But anyway, you can actually, if you want to go to my website.
So Ingram Spark, yeah.
www.stephaniewebb.com. And there's the links to buy it on there.
Yeah. And then we'll put a link below anyway, so people can connect to it from there. Yes. Oh, how exciting. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Isn't it? I never ever thought I could accomplish anything, but
look at you now with your podcast and your book. It's amazing, Stephanie.
And I'm getting over that imposter syndrome, where you're just like, you can't do this. Who is going to listen to you? And now that voice goes away the more you do these kind of things.
Yes.
You're like, I can't do it.
Yeah. And people can learn from that. So the more that you do something, the quicker that voice will reduce.
Yes.
And quieten down. Stop giving you a hard time. Because it will do over time. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie.
Thank you, Kate. This was so much fun.
Fabulous having you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I know that the listeners will really appreciate your honesty and learn from you. from your experience. So thank you very much.
Thank you for giving me the chance.
So that's all for today's episode of Bulimia Sucks. And thank you to everybody for listening. And join us again on the next episode of Bulimia Sucks. And make sure that you subscribe to the podcast on Apple iTunes so you never miss an episode. And also check out my book, Bulimia Sucks, on Amazon to learn many different techniques to help you to begin to break through your painful bulimic behaviors. And I'd love to hear what you think. So please leave me a review. So thank you to everybody for listening. And I'll speak to you in the next episode.